Earlier this year, Google unveiled a new service for advertisers that would allow them to collect more information than ever before about our surfing habits. The service, called Universal Analytics, is designed to find out more information about web users and exactly what we're using the internet for. The launch of the invasive service was widely ignored by the corporate media following the backlash Google received when it announced changes to its privacy policy. Today, computing.co.uk reports that the launch of the new service marks the culmination of a year-long plan by Google to consolidate the different privacy policies that had grown up around the company's services, so that the collection, storage and ultimately analysis of personal data could likewise be consolidated and unified. But as we all know, when the new privacy policy was introduced in January 2012, there was much outcry. French data protection agency CNIL wrote to Google expressing its concerns and stated, "Our preliminary investigation shows that it is extremely difficult to know exactly which data is combined between which services for which purposes, even for trained privacy professionals." It also added, CNIL and the EU data protection authorities are deeply concerned about the combination of personal data across services. They have strong doubts about the lawfulness and fairness of such processing and about its compliance with European data protection legislation. CNL was subsequently appointed to lead an EU investigation into Google's personal data collection activities. In its defense, Google claimed that its aim was merely to streamline and simplify its privacy practices across all the online services it offered across the world. And regardless of the opposition, it still went ahead with its plan. But it was only with the launch of Universal Analytics at the end of October 2012 that the true purpose of Google's privacy policy rewrite became clear. One of the key changes introduced with Universal Analytics is now that analytics is based on users rather than visits. We're interested in user behavior overall, not behavior of disconnected visits or sessions. We do this by having an override ID on every device interacting with Google Analytics. Sure, there are issues, like we still need to identify people via a login or some other means, but once we can do so, we can now see specific users across devices very easily, explains analytics group Lunametrics. Now, cookies were also simplified, but data that was stored in those cookies now instead resides on Google servers, helping to unify collection and storage of individuals' private data across different devices. Yet, rather than raising heckles in the mainstream press, as the change to the privacy policy had done, it was almost completely ignored outside of the specialist marketing press. The move by Google certainly displayed a great deal of arrogance by the company. Universal Analytics had been launched just weeks after the European Union's Article 29 Working Party, which oversees data protection issues, had reprimanded the company over its privacy policies and had threatened legal action within months if Google refused to make changes. And it added to the investigation that the EU was already conducting into whether the company abused its monopoly in search to promote its own services over and above those of its rivals. Google has the only relevant search engine in terms of market share, the world's largest ad network, DoubleClick, and the world's most widely used web analytics service. All of this means that it has already cornered the market for personal data, says Privacy International founder Simon Davis. Google Analytics, he says, already enable users to obtain granular data about visitors to websites, including a visitor's location, the website he or she visited before coming to the business's website, and what actions the user takes on the business's website. All this is based on uniquely identifiable data, even if real identities are not directly disclosed. He adds, Google ostensibly uses this data to help website owners analyze traffic to the sites, but in my view, too little attention has been paid to the fact that Google Analytics also enables Google itself to amass vast quantities of data about individuals' online behavioral patterns. And that data feeds directly into Google's mission to have the strongest advertising network in the world and all the world's information. What has especially riled data protection agencies is the seemingly wide-ranging rights of data collection and usage that Google has assumed. Indeed, its privacy policy places no explicit limit on the scope and potential uses of the personal data it collects, potentially in contravention of the EU's 1995 Data Protection Directive. It also lends weight to the growing belief that Google is collecting too much data, with little respect either for people's rights to privacy or indeed the law. When Google Street View cars took to the roads in 2007, they weren't just taking pictures of the hedgerows, they were also deliberately designed to scan for Wi-Fi connections and to record the data from unprotected networks. If a private individual such as you or I had conducted such a concerted campaign, we would have been jailed for hacking. Google had blamed a rogue engineer for that incident, yet not only was the scanning conducted in 30 countries worldwide, but even 2 years later it had still not destroyed the data, prompting a complaint to Scotland Yard by Privacy International, and in fact a new investigation by the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. And earlier in the year, Google had also been caught out circumventing the default privacy controls built into Apple's Safari web browser to prevent the placing of third-party cookies to build profiles on users. In terms of its own services, Google is increasingly trying to arm-lock users of one service into using others. For example, accessing the Android Play Store requires a Gmail account, and rating or reviewing apps in the store also requires an account for the unpopular and little used Google Plus social networking tool. All the recent privacy breaches are just the latest in a long line of questions raised over the data collection activities of a company whose official motto is to do no evil. However, the analytics of user data has been at the very heart of Google's initiatives in big data. Indeed, the big data tool Hadoop partly grew out of two research papers published in 2003 and 2004. Now, in-house though, the company has been working on something much more ambitious. Dremel, which was introduced in-house at Google in 2009, was described in a paper by Google Research as an interactive analysis of web-scale datasets, and it's capable of running aggregation queries over trillion-row tables in seconds. The system scales to thousands of CPUs and petabytes of data, and already has thousands of users at Google. Indeed, queries can be run on multiple petabytes of data with responses returned in seconds, making it much faster and more capable than Hadoop. Now, the trouble is, collecting and using personal data is baked into Google's DNA, and it's what it does, and the collection and analysis of personal data is what gives Google its immense power. Protecting consumer privacy would be a vast challenge in such an environment, says Davis. The launch of Universal Analytics is only old news in the sense that it is yet another story demonstrating the company's efforts to collect and combine personal data. Now, Google refused to comment when computing.co.uk approached them with a list of questions about its analytics activities, but the attitude of the company as a whole is no doubt set by its executive chairman, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked in 2010 about the company's data collection policies, he despicably responded with, "If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place." Well, that's all from me for today. For more news that you're not supposed to know, visit rinf.com, and thank you for watching.